I love how Don's just
Oh, it
dancing
drumming
along.
away,
And
man.
oh,
Yeah.
hell yeah. It's a good tune. YouTube has some
Hmm.
good license-free songs. But
Yeah.
anyways, welcome to You'll Probably Agree, everyone. And today with the establishing shot is Jeff York. And with Every Movie Has a Lesson, and I'm not 25 years later, Film Obsessive is Don Shanahan. So guys, thank you so much for coming on. I wanted to
Thank you,
do
Evans.
something for the 4th of July, and I was going through
Mhm.
movies. I'm calling Team America, born on the 4th of July. And then I asked everyone in the discussion thread, hey, what movie do you guys think we should choose? And I
Yeah.
think Jeff came up with The American President, and a lot of other people saw it. I never saw it for the first time. And I'll let you
Really?
guys, yeah, I'll let you
Okay.
guys know my thoughts on it. But
Yeah.
we will start out with Don. Could you give me a
Mhm.
brief synopsis of the movie and your thoughts on it? And then we'll go to Jeff's
Yeah.
thoughts.
This well, I mean, you can do place in history, you can do synopsis of the movie. This is a widowed president, if I'm saying it correctly. Yeah, a widowed president who has a preteen daughter who's in his second term looking for his legacy, looking to kind of close out his string as president. He wants to get a big fat crime bill across the the congressional floor into his signature. But along the way, he has flutters of heart that make him fall in love, and he falls in love with a lobbyist of all people, which is its own occupational hazard when you're a president. And you have this movie where you have a president trying to figure out elections and, well, re-election, I should actually say. He's not closing out a string. He's working on a re-election against an incumbent, or as an incumbent, with some adversaries that are kind of after him because of whatever softness they see in his campaign and his stance, made from the PR machine even more softer with this romantic centerpiece of the movie where the president's dating someone. And how does that work when you're in the Oval Office? How does that work when you're the most powerful man in the world? And all those light shenanigans that occur here from Rob Reiner, who has a gentle touch. That's When Harry Met Sally's Rob Reiner. And you have Aaron Sorkin kind of putting some zinging dialogue into what this can be, to combine those two sensibilities together of taut politics with relatable romance, and you get Michael Douglas, the man of Wall Street, actually playing a good guy for the first time
Mm-hmm.
in quite a long time during this era of '94. And you have a movie that, I don't know if it was a massive hit, but it was a solid winner in the '90s, where solid winners were all you had to do. Double off the wall, it scores 2 runs is all you need when you don't need to make 25 $100 million. So yeah, this is now today, 30 years later, here 31 years later, it has become a, I don't know, a wished upon glass case time capsule of, like, man, couldn't politics be that easy as it was then to where we got now. But as a movie, yeah, this is date night in the White House.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, what are your thoughts on the film?
Yeah, that was a very good encapsulation of it, Don. And I was going to correct you, but you corrected yourself. He was
Yeah.
running for re-election.
Mhm.
Okay.
And you caught yourself on that, so
Yeah.
that's good. And I thought it was a terrific movie. I mean, it's very much of the time period where there was, I think, a renewed interest in politics and the presidency. The Democrats were in the White House. There was wanting to do good again. There were lots of big issues that needed addressing, and a lot of them were being addressed. And we started to hear about things like climate change, and the gun problem was only going to get worse, and various things like that were becoming sort of the main issues, as opposed to some of the stuff that was maybe a decade earlier, or even in the 60s and 70s, where I think we were a little more internationally focused, and some of those kind of things with wars and such. But I liked it a lot. I mean, I think it's very witty and very clever, and I think, to Don's point, it was a good hit. It was well received by and large. I think it was quite unique for Douglas to do such a role and do very well in it, and yet he still gives it a little bit of edge too, which I think was a nice choice on his part, that he wasn't trying to be too good. In fact, I think it was continuing to establish Douglas as an actor who took risks. He did this movie after Redford turned it down, because Redford just wanted to do it as a romantic comedy, and Douglas was willing to take on some of the edgier issues in it, just as he had taken on the role of the dad in Traffic when a number of years later, when Harrison Ford had turned that down because it was a little too edgy. So bravo to Michael Douglas, continuing to always take edgy works, especially when he does things like Basic Instinct or playing Liberace. He's a risk taker, and this was a risk for him too, but he did it very, very well. I will say this, and one thing that Don didn't touch on, but I think this film's reputation has built over the decades, not only for the wishful thinking that it represents, and that we could go back to sort of that time when we could all get along, but I dare say, it has been often used as a template of like, why is Obama not addressing the Republicans raging about his birth certificate? Why is Biden not raging about this kind of stuff? And I've heard many, many Democratic pundits and people say he needs his Andrew Shepard moment at the end when he comes out and cleans the clock of every naysayer about his presidency with that little sort of impromptu appearance at the press conference. And I think that has sort of reinforced this movie. I also think, as Mike was saying earlier, Mike wasn't familiar with this movie, but he's very familiar with The West Wing. And this was the walk up to The West Wing. And The West Wing has sort of been established as one of the great TV shows of the 90s and, the turn of the century. And this is like, oh, wow, he did this before that. Sorkin wrote this, Aaron Sorkin wrote this before that. And it's very similar. Even the theme, as Mike said, is pretty close to what Mark Shaman wrote for the West Wing's series. So I think, if anything, that show has given this movie all the more lasting power, as well as all those other reasons. And you don't see a lot of scripts that are this clever and about something and have real things they're trying to say. There's not a Me Tooism or even Steven, or we're going to have to leave it there. It's like, nope, I'm coming for the guns, and climate change is real, and let's stop pussyfooting around this. And this needs to be all of our legacies, let alone Andrew Shepard's.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. Our first timer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I saw the movie for the first time and I thought it was absolutely lovely. I really like how this is a rom-com, but it's way more than that. It's really about decency. It's about the American values that we like to think that we hold, but now are slipping away. And it made me nostalgic for the 90s. I'm going to throw up the spoilers just in case, because I know we'll be getting into it. One thing that really kind of struck me is when the Republican opponents, Bob Rumson, played by Richard Dreyfuss, he's attacking Michael Douglas's character for how dare he goes on a date with someone, but that's all he's got. And it reminded me of the whole Monica Lewinsky scandal that I think happened within like the following year, where everyone tried to the Republicans tried to impeach President Clinton because he got fellatio while on the phone, which I gotta say, if you're on the phone with a world leader while that's happening, that's impressive. Like that.
He was on hold. He was on hold to pay the water bill. That's all there was to it. Yeah. Columbia House. He needed his CDs. Yeah.
But you're right, Mike. It was a big issue at the time. The sort of character of the president. Bill Clinton was somebody who didn't go to Vietnam. Bob Dole, his opponent, was. Bob Dole kept making about, is Bill Clinton a worthy American hero, somebody that we really should admire, who was against the war, smoked pot, cheated on his wife. All this was known before Clinton became president. And then when he was running for re-election, they kind of dialed it back up. And now here we sit with the president who's a sitting felon of 34, multiple problems with his sex life, and et cetera, et cetera. And now America's just fine with that. So 30 years on, the question of character is, you're right, that almost makes it sort of quaint to think that was such a big issue. But that's what I think Aaron Sorkin was responding to, is like, what actually makes character. And I think with Andy Shepard, what made his character is not only standing up for his girlfriend and for the right that he had to have a girlfriend, even if she was too liberal of a lobbyist for some of the opponents of Shepard's in the movie, but also, standing up for the righteousness of the political bills that he wanted to get through. And we all should, but somehow over the course of the last 3 decades, a lot of those things have become dirty words to certain people in this country. And it's inexplicable that we would not want to do something about climate change. It's inexplicable that we think that all these guns are acceptable. And yet you watch this, and it's like, Yeah, there was a time when that was kind of a big issue, and now they aren't issues anymore. Part of the bill that passed today has basically the elimination of all sort of tax credits for environmental protections and cars and stuff like that. And it barely gets batted an eye at because they've given up on it, both sides, a long time ago. And here in 95, they were making this, one of the centerpieces of the American president's agenda.
Yeah. And 30 years later, these issues are still like at the huge forefront. I mean, the fact that they were concerned about climate change 30 years ago, I mean, even dating before that, is really telling of where Congress is, because they always want to vote on the bill that has Americans scared, because Bob Run, they want to do the crime bill. Like, oh, we got to stop crime. We got to stop crime. But as Michael Douglas says in his final speech, we have to, if we want to do a crime bill, we can't do this one. We have to crack down on gun control, because that's what's really happening. And then I think 4 years later, the Columbine incident happened, and then more incidents. And it just makes it so sad how prevalent that is. But it's always the Democrats, like they do the littlest thing and the Republicans jump on it, while the Republicans, they can do all sorts of crazy shit and they get away with it. There's a great soundbite that Obama usually says where, he's talking about Trump and he goes, imagine if I did this. Imagine what the response would be, especially for a black president. Oh my God, when they come after him. And how everyone goes after Shepard's character really shows how Americans are more, like not all Americans, but a majority of Americans are more interested in sound bites and scandals than they are actual policy. Yeah. And that's what this movie really reflects.
Especially when you consider this movie being pre-social media, pre-internet predominantly, where the wildfire that is spread in this movie is the court of public opinion and tabloid level TV, which it still exists to this day for sure. But like the soundbite, like you said, sound bites that started as the earworms in this movie would just be the tweets and the 1,000 things we are inundated with now. So it's really something to look back at this and look at it the way we do. I hate to say it, but just right. It's trite looking at this movie 30 years later. It's as trite as when in the 90s, when this movie was made, we would look back at Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and go, oh, isn't that charming? It really has been surprisingly that long since this movie, and how, it is just a different kind of time capsule. But yet it still has, Jeff said it with the idea of edge, it still has enchantment. And that's the thing that makes it keep coming back. Even though the issues have their anchors and merits that still reverberate today, they don't have the same sharpened edge that they still carry, because we're talking about how we've abandoned a lot of this stuff. But I think what gets people to come back to this movie is the enchantment, is the romance in the White House, is the and some of that is the bygone way in which they talk to each other, because even the intellectual conversations and butting of heads that Andrew and that Annette and Michael have as characters is still fascinating. Like their jobs still bleed into their romance, and it's inescapable, of course, because one of them's president. But just those conversations of changes of heart and just the emphasis on belonging that they both want to try to do is really, it's charming. It's a great place to be. And then Jeff said the other thing, right? By the time you package that with the loveliness of the White House and Mark Shaman's score, and then dynamite supporting cast, because you're right, this was Martin Sheen walking before he would run in the West Wing. Michael J. Fox steals every scene he's in.
Doing the George Stephanopoulos character.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's right.
In there, which is very funny. He's basically playing that guy.
There's a great line from him when he's getting in an argument with the president, and someone says to him, hey, you can't speak back to the president. And then he says, I am a citizen. This is my president. And this country, it's not only permissible to question our president, it's our responsibility. Yeah. And we've really had now a leader where he doesn't want to be questioned. Everything he says is right. And we have to, pray at his altar. And it's so unfortunate we're like that, because real patriotism in this country isn't just, and I said this last week on the on the Paths of Glory podcast, that real patriotism isn't just waving your flag and supporting your country whenever it does anything right. It's challenging your country.
Yeah.
It's telling them when they're wrong. Real patriotism is, and this might be controversial, when Sydney Allen Wade tries to get her character burned because she burned the American flag. It wasn't saying I hate America. She's saying I hate what America is doing. We're a better country. We stand for better values, and that's why I'm doing this. Like, I had to do this to get your attention. But this is sort of what the country needs, and we really need a galvanized front through social media and through what social media is the main thing to really get. Yeah, because it's different. Because back then, you probably call your constituents and they would actually answer the phone.
Or you hang every word on a press conference. Like when Andrew Shepard comes in at the end and gives that monologue of monologues, it's one of the best damn speeches in movie history, in my opinion. Like what a section of dialogue done by Sorkin. For that to be the stamp of the character in the movie is fantastic. Delivery of Douglas, like we were joking before we recorded. Jeff's like, and you called her a whore. Like you just drizzle it down like you're John Wayne in a Western, steering down the barrel.
And the camera keeps getting closer to him too.
Like
until his face is really all that fills the screen for that line, which is like, but it's almost like Good and the Bad, the Ugly, with the close-ups on Clint Eastwood and sort of staring down the Van Cleef.
But in that era, that's when we heard from the man. Was press conferences, was from his own mouth, not a Twitter account, not a social media post, not a press secretary. It would come from the dude himself, who would get down on that podium and say something and put time in with reporters and stuff. We don't have much of that. We have Truth Social and the jargon of that. I like Benning's line later in the movie where she's like, how do you have patience with Americans who clearly don't love America? And that line rings as true as can be today as it did 30 years back. So to what you were thinking, Mike, where it's just, man, where's the galvanizing figures? Where's the place to question this country and act on things you don't see going right with patience, which we definitely, in the 24-second news cycle we have today versus the 24-hour news cycle we had 30 years ago, we don't have,
Well, it's fascinating too, because Sorkin was able to get a lot of his thoughts about politics and America and where we are and our lack of history. I think so much of this is about how people quickly forget history. Like Sydney Allen Wade protesting the war, they were right. The people who protested the war, the Vietnam War, were correct. Yeah. They were on the right side of the argument there. And here we are 30 years after that fact in this movie, and they're still arguing about, like, well, she was this hippie out there protesting practically. It's like, guys, those of you who defended the Vietnam War were wrong. That was judged and decided. But, we can't even decide on an insurrection and what's considered, a crime. I mean, we're creating, the alligator Auschwitz here to put not just the baddest of the bad, as they said they were going to deport, but now just anybody who maybe the Trump administration decides isn't worthy of being an American in their world. Yep. Those kind of things here. And yet this movie is all about, your free speech. You have the right to stand up and say what you want. And ultimately, free speech, as he says in that great speech that you talked about, Don, I'm going to read it here because I will butcher it otherwise. But he says, you want free speech? Let's see you acknowledge a man whose words make your blood boil, who's standing center stage and advocating at the top of his lungs that which you would spend a lifetime opposing at the top of yours. You want to claim this land as the land of the free? Then a symbol of your country can't just be a flag. The symbol also has to be one of its citizens exercising his or her right to burn that flag in protest. We've forgotten all this. That's been written into the Constitution. It's been written into the rights of people, and all that stuff now is considered, well, then you're un-American. It's like, well, no, we're not your version of what you think an American is. But the good thing is the Constitution covers a lot of kinds of Americans and a lot of kinds of freedoms in them. They're trying to take them away. So I give him credit for saying that. And of course, in the mouthpiece of the president, it's not as much speech fine. One other thing I wanted to just say too that was interesting, Don, because you hit on a great point, I think. this was all before social media and sort of instant reads on stuff. And, they had polling that would take a while to find it. But, there wasn't everything as being calculated. And yet it's funny here because like Ann Devere Smith as the press secretary, and even Michael J. Fox to some degree, and certainly David Paymer in the one scene where they're talking about bombing Libya as a retaliation measure. They're thinking about the reputation of the president, how it's going to look, what's it going to play. And that to me is one of the problems with today is that's all they think about. And they only think about it for the 24-hour news cycle, win the day, as it were, win the soundbite, win the press coverage. And they don't see the bigger picture here, where I think that's the great thing about this movie is at the end of the day, the most admirable character in the movie is Andrew Shepard, because he is the president and he's got his big eye on the big picture. He's also, which is very crafty, and I think they did the same thing with the Martin Sheen character in the West Wing, is he's a history professor. So that allows him to bring up history and talk about it and sort of in context and stuff like that. And I think that stuff is forgotten so much today. And when you say, well, how did we forget Bill Clinton when we got somebody like Donald Trump, who seems to be the poster boy for all those bad things? I mean, they used to get mad at Obama for wearing a tan suit that one time when he had to announce the thing. And that was considered disrespectful or whatever. And now here we are. But, so many people today forget it. Even the people who are elected or in the news, they're all about winning that soundbite, winning that news cycle, that 24-hour news cycle, if not that hour news cycle, and they don't see the bigger picture. So a lot of this stuff that should matter doesn't stick to the wall very long.
We're doing that today too. How much news coverage is out there for P. Diddy's jury as much as it is?
And it came right after the bill was approved by the Senate, because we've got to move on to the next big thing to get the eyeballs.
Like by this time tomorrow, that outrage level you would hope stays high, but at the same time, watch it just be a fart in the wind. It's wild. And I admire this movie because you have those internal discussions of how they are actively thinking about it. Now, as much as that's all the president thinks about today and blathers right here, to see it done in this movie, to have all those conversations of image and how will this look for the presidency and the president, I admire those conversations because they seem like they're going in the right places, because it is that history professor spine. That great pool table argument between Sheen and Douglas is that spot where I know those conversations aren't happening in the current White House. It's spin, 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 not principles, like it was said in that pool argument. There's just, I admire the conversation. Yes, it is about image, but how it is discussed and how it is handled here versus now, polar differences. It's amazing.
Yeah. And the amazing thing in this movie is like some of the dialogue really speaks to today. There's a little clip I want to play here, and it's about Bob Rumson, and it's from that final speech of the movie. And it talks about how fear is pretty much pushed on the American people instead of policy. Let's take a look.
We have serious problems to solve, and we need serious people to solve them. And whatever your particular problem is, I promise you, Bob Rumson is not the least bit interested in solving it. He is interested in two things, and two things only: making you afraid of it and telling you who's to blame for it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you win elections.
And sadly, he was right, because I mean, not Obama. Trump always says, well, I was going to do this, but then Biden did this, or I was going to do this, and Obama ruined the country. And all they do is pump fear. It's like, oh, you're poor? Vote for me. I'll make everything better. Oh, you're afraid of the Middle East? Vote for me. I'll bomb them. It's all about how we dig into people's psychoses and basically tell them, whatever you're afraid of, I'm going to be the one. Because Trump even said on stage at one point, I think he said, like, I am your salvation, I am your savior, or something like that. And that's sort of what
the chosen one. He said he was the chosen one. And I don't think he meant Neo from The Matrix.
No. I would love to see him flying a long coat, though. That'd be hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, but they constantly pump this fear into people, and then people don't vote out of their hearts; they vote out of their guts because social media 24-hour news, and also the fact that, you know, a lot of people don't like to read. So there's that too. And I'm not saying, oh, most Americans are dumb and they don't like to read. Hey, trust me, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I try, you know. And I think the problem with this country is that we have an intellectual sort of disability where we're not encouraged to read. We're not encouraged to explore art. We're not encouraged to really look at someone's policy, because like they said earlier in the film, they said Americans don't care about policy. They just care about what's going to scare them. And that's so true, because every single day we hear America, you know, you go to a Trump rally, they're like, I'm worried about these immigrants. They're going to do something to us. And of course, Trump makes immigrants like the boogeyman. So that's where everyone voted. And it's just so unfortunate that we're going to get a lot of Americans now who say, oh, I regret my vote. And it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't have followed the Bob Rumson strategy. Try listening to the person who's calm, collected, and actually, if you look at their policies, you know, Google exists, you can read it. They can help you out. But now we have a spin machine where there's just constant misinformation. There was a part where Bob Rumson said, oh, well, I didn't go to Harvard like Andrew Shepard did. And then he goes, I went to Stanford, you blowhole. And then he turns the TV off. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happens. No one corrected him. And that's where we are today. So really, it's amazing how it talks about misinformation.
And yet we have so many counter engines to it that still don't get read by informed voters, like PolitiFact and Snopes and the Ad Fontes Media Chart. We didn't need those in 1994, you know, but we sure need them now. And even then, people will be like, you know, they just pick their station and believe what they believe. And it's just, you're on it with intellectual disability in some fashion where, they just won't dig. They're not discerning voters as well as informed voters, and it's pervasive. It's terrible. Yeah,
I think one of the things too that I think was interesting about this movie is that it shows that the presidency is hard, not just trying to figure out if he can even have a dating life with everything else going on. I love the fact that the first date they have is interrupted by having to leave it early to take care of something with Libya, you know, and not like, well, my daughter didn't get the cheerleading squad gig, so she's really upset. I better go home. No, it's Libya bombed us. So excuse me, I've got to cut our date short. But it's about the task at hand and the difficulty of the job. And I think one of the things that gets at the Bob Rumson character here and sort of the easy low-hanging fruit, and I think we've become a little bit in that way as a country, is we want everything a little too easy now, and we've gotten spoiled. A lot of stuff is easy, you know. We have everything on our phone right in front of us: music, talking to people, getting our news, playing games, 100 other things,
weather,
you know,
traffic, all of it.
Exactly. It's we don't even need laptops. They think in another 10 years we won't even have laptops because we'll just have these phones or maybe a chip in us that projects it in the screen like it's AI or something. You know, Minority Report. But I also think that being a student of history and being aware of what's going on in the world, dare I say, requires work, and citizenship requires work, as Andy Shepard here says, and people don't want to do it. They'd rather go to their tribe and get the news that agrees with them, so they don't have to think. They don't have to take any risk in that. The other thing I'll just throw in, it's a little bit out of left field, but I think it plays off of what you were saying in that clip, Mike. You know, Alfred Hitchcock once was asked why he did thrillers, and he said, well, I could do a comedy, but comedy is very subjective, you know, what your point of view is, whatever else. But he said, if I hold a gun on a room full of 20 people, everyone in that room has the same reaction. And he goes, being able to manipulate that many people who are going to be sitting in an audience and knowing that I have the control over how I let them breathe or relieve or feel better and stuff is a great sense of control. And I dare say, I think that's what's so much about the news and politics. For years, they used to say, if it bleeds, it leads. You know, we got to be afraid. We got to be afraid of that murder or that fire or that attack or something, you know, and people just respond to that. They're just, it's instant, like, holding that gun on them, as Hitchcock said. And to your point, I think that politics and news and everything has just been about sensation and fear and this uneasiness that they want us to feel, and then they'll relieve it somehow, or, you know, we'll move on to the next thing. But it's not very smart. It's very primal, but it's not really intellectual. And to your point, they're not doing their homework to read. They're not listening. They're not paying attention. They don't want the other side of it. I'm going to just quote one other character here too, because it reminds me a lot when you have these idealistic heroes in movies. But one of the things I always loved about the television series Star Trek is, well, first of all, it's assumed that we made it through all the bad shit. Like somehow, hey, that globe got its act together that they could have become a federation of planets, not just the United Nations. But also, William Shatner as James T. Kirk was a great risk taker. In fact, one of his most famous speeches about taking risks and going outside of our comfort zone and seeing what else is out there, listening to somebody else's point of view. That's the great education you get from college. Not that you learn more about math or whatever major you've chosen. It's like, oh, I'm dealing with people who aren't from my town or aren't from my neighborhood. And these people are from, halfway around the world. So I'm getting a different point of view. Risk putting your values and your person and your thoughts out there with other people and see what the world is like and, get out of your comfort zone. And I think Shepard is sort of asking us to do that as citizens here, just as Captain Kirk was trying to say to, whatever alien he was talking to at the time, that, we have to keep exploring strange new worlds. These are lost arts in respect as mankind goes. But I think everybody just wants to be left alone, and sort of commiserating with their tribe, the people who all think like they do.
And the main thing, there was this thing I did way back. Well, no, I did it last year. It's called deep canvassing. And what you do is you call voters in battleground states and you ask them what issues are bothering them. And you don't do it with judgment. You do it with empathy and you talk to them kindly. And you don't, like where I am right now, Door County, there's a bunch of people who don't agree with me. But, that's okay, because we always like to say, oh, if you're a Trump supporter, you're horrible, you're racist, you're this and that. And not all of them are like that. They're just misinformed. They don't want to read what's going on. And really, that's like they probably do. They're probably not bad people. Some of the nicest people I've known who've given everything have, like these crazy old viewpoints. But if we don't talk to each other in this country, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to keep splitting up into little factions and saying, you're wrong, you're a terrible person. And we don't get anywhere with that. And Andrew Shepard's final speech really represented, like, yes, I'm doing this. I know you don't agree with it, but it's the right thing to be done. And we really need to have a discussion in this country instead of just, Xing each other off a list.
I think something this movie does, and maybe it's antiquated because we are talking pre-internet, social media. There's a different, like this movie is a lot of talking to people instead of talking at people.
Yes.
The conversations are intimate. Like, they're doing it. It might not be nose to nose eye contact like your UFC fighters, but it's two guys playing pool, but they're talking to each other. It's a suitor and a lady talking to each other. It's Michael Douglas staring down the barrel of that camera talking to Americans, like not at them so much. Or the differences of the people who talk at versus the ones who talk to show the difference between the antagonist and the protagonist in this movie. And I like to think that's intentional from Sorkin to like create these scenes, not just these lines of dialogue, but like, and maybe that's Reiner too. Like, let's put them in a place, let's put them in a setting, let's put them in these situations where the dialogue's flowing through, but it's in the setting matters a little bit. And some of that is production design. Some of that is, again, just good camera work from the DP and then Reiner putting him in position. So what's amazing to me is like, it's such a one. Sorkin and Reiner did A Few Good Men a couple years before this, and what a 180 movie where, but that movie also thrived on talking to instead of talking at, and it's really subtle, but it's strong.
Yeah, Sorkin is. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say, to that point too, I think we have to give Rob Reiner credit here too. He is, for a while there, he was a director who almost could do no wrong. He did Misery, Stand By Me, A Few Good Men, lots of great work. And he was a great actor, and I think he's a great talent. And I think his ability to not only encourage Sorkin to write these characters and these conversations, to your point, Don, where so much of the drama and fascination of this story, as well as the comedy, is between people talking to each other and, maybe having slightly different takes on things. But, there's this banter, there's, this back and forth, rat-a-tat-tat, very similar in some respects to the comedies of the 30s and Howard Hawks and His Girl Friday and some of those kind of things, even where there's energy and enthusiasm. And it's not that people hate each other, but they're a little edgy, like an Italian Family or maybe people in a political thing would be. Or certainly I used to tell my ex-wife, when I going, if that's how people talk in advertising, they're in a room talking about ideas and having fun. Same with us as critics getting on these shows. Like, do those people like each other? No, I think they hate each other. No, we like each other a lot, but we have fun engaging, and that's part of what energy and excitement is about in dialogue and meeting of minds. But Reiner's so good with the casting here too. Like even in the small roles, David Paymer in that role where he's, a little bit of a wonk. He looks like the kind of guy who'd probably be the numbers guy. The guy who was good in algebra. Yeah. And, he's the guy here where Martin Sheen is, he's got this gravitas. Like you can see he's the power behind the throne. That's why he's the chief of staff, which is also accurate because the chief of staff runs the White House and he's kind of the person who sets the agenda. So you need a co-president there. And I think those kind of bits of thing. The other thing I'd like to just say, if you don't mind me segueing into it, Mike, and I'm not trying to hijack your show,
for it. No,
but
great.
One of the things that I think is also great about Sorkin here, but mostly I think you have to hand it to, in some respects, to Rob Reiner, is this is a very funny movie too. There's so much good comedy here without it ever feeling jokey or shticky. I mean, no slapstick, but there are almost the slamming door farces kind of stuff of the classic, like when Sydney stays over and they're all coming in the morning, like, the press is already camped outside, it's 5 a.m. and what are we going to do when the door slamming and who's coming in now? There's some of that kind of stuff even in the Oval Office with the entrance and stuff. It's very funny and very charming, and as romantic as it is, and it's very romantic, and it's nice to see Michael Douglas have a kind of a positive sexual relationship in a movie where disclosure
was the year before.
Disclosure year before, and of course Basic Instinct, and even back in Coma days, he didn't trust his girlfriend, until the very end. It's like, oh, now you kind of get it. She's almost dead, but you finally got it. But here he gets it early, and is really a good man about it. But it's funny, the banter between Annette Bening and Michael Douglas here, not exactly actors known for comedy per se, is very clever, and you like them and you like their banter. And like when he said, like, by the way, I may be, the most powerful man on the planet, but that should be a precursor to how you're going to interpret my performance in bed. It's been a while.
And she's
fantastic, and it's so funny. And she's in charge here. She comes in his shirt, and she's checking out the pillows, and the thing is like, and it's so funny, to see the president of the United States suddenly like, I hope I don't disappoint her. Like he's only worried about one voter at that point, and she gets a very important vote at the end of that night. I love that there's that in it too. They handle that so well without it ever becoming, here comes a big shticky moment.
Yeah, my two favorite lines, like in that banter department, and it adds to the enchantment department, is like when he's behind her and she doesn't know in the meeting, and he just ends it with, "Let's take him out back and beat the shit out of him." Just it's such a great zinger of a line, and it disarms him, it disarms her, disarms the moment. Everybody stands up, you move on, and it's quick. It would be something, despite the S word, it'd be something that would be in a 30s film. Then the other one is like, just, I don't know, did he say it to Martin Sheen? The organization, the United Brotherhood, of none of your damn business, stuff like that.
That's right. That was good.
Zingers, this quick little, like you said, banter. Like
and they give it to other characters too, John.
And
Sorry.
But you have a series movie with big issues and vocabulary that's up there, and yet you're still, let's take him out back and beat the shit out of him. Like you can balance that.
Yeah,
like,
he's a guy who's got a sense of humor. He's a person. He would say something like that to be funny. Or the other smaller roles that they fill in it too. Like I love the fact that John Mahoney was doing a lot of character work in movies at the time, and he's in one scene, but he really registers, and he's great. And he gets the curtain line of that, like, just how about that? There's never an egg timer when you need one. And just that kind of presence and those kind of characters, especially when you have so many. One of my favorite roles ever in a film is this one. And it's Samantha Morton as basically his secretary, who's like, when he's walking down, it's like, happy birthday. Did we send? Oh, yeah, she sent flowers this morning. Like she's got all that shit taken care of for her. She doesn't really ever go from A more than to D as a character, but she's good at her job, and she's efficient, and she's helping things move along. And she was kind of an up and coming actress at the time. So to put her in that role, kind of like, she's kind of important as an actress in this time period, and that's an important role. And just that little shorthand of putting something like that in, who and yet she's doing that kind of role is very shrewd and charming. And to your point, I think those scenes are enchanting because like that's the presidency too. And yeah, he can't know every last person who's working on the lighting in the hallway or something like that, but she helps him because he means to. He just doesn't have the time to, but that's what she's there for. That kind of stuff plays as good as all the major stuff.
Yeah, and Sorkin's dialogue is a lot like a game of ping pong. You know, people are going back and forth. They're like constantly coming up with really good lines. Like the dialogue sounds like it's written, but it's delivered like it's natural. You know, like if you watch something like Steve, if you watch something like Steve Jobs, it's like everyone's monologuing, but it works with that kind of movie because it kind of has this play-like structure. And his movies are a lot like plays. They're very dialogue-driven, but they're never like snooty or condescending. Like you said, Don, they're talking to the audience, you know, and that's Sorkin.
And they're smart people. They're smart people too.
Mm-hmm.
You expect smart people to speak well and be quick.
He's not going to write. Like Sorkin's not going to write a hayseed thriller. He's not going to do like Logan Lucky the way he's in Soderbergh gig or Cauliflower, you know. Like, but that's Sorkin. Sorkin has a lane, and you've seen what he's done since this. Like, he's done the David Fincher stuff. He's done Trial of the Chicago 7. Like, he stayed with smart people, and he just knows his lane, and he's good at it. And it would obviously go on to be great success for him because the rat-a-tat speed that you see in Social Network, it also takes certain actors to pull that off. Like Sheen can say all those lines and just stay right flat, stay really good. And when you have to be an asshole, here comes Bradley Whitford in West Wing, where he's a professional movie asshole, yet sing with these lines. It's so good.
But he's a good guy still. That's the thing. He's an asshole.
He's our asshole.
Like, he's our asshole.
Yeah. The other thing too, can I just? Oh, I'm sorry, Michael. One other thing I just wanted to say about tropes of comedy, which is not only the banter and the characters and making everybody, from the supporting characters, no matter how many lines they have, sort of register, which is, I think, the sign of great writing, great directing, great casting. There's also stuff in here that's really funny too that you just don't see much in comedy anymore, and it used to be a staple, and that is the recurring gag. The running gag, as it's often called. I mean, Andrew Shepard is trying to send her flowers and he can't, and he wants to send her what's the state flower, Virginia.
Oh yeah, he wanted to get state flower, and they go back and forth.
Right,
on the
and
phone.
then he ends up sending her a
tree,
Virginia
not a
ham.
flower. What? No.
Right, and the Virginia, and it just becomes this shtick, and he kind of is like, he can't get dialed out, and he's trying to make a goal. Those little bits are hilarious. Then of course, what's the sort of the curtain line between them before he walks in to give his speech is, well, it turns out I have a rose garden, and we all know that. So it's plain of, we're smart too, because we know that the president has this famous rose garden. So I mean, those kind of bits that Sorkin and Reiner are, respecting that shtick, going back to vaudeville, going back to plays, and going back to movies in the 30s, and where there's recurring themes and running gags. That's still here. You just don't see that much in movies and even shows anymore. I mean, they have bits, I guess, and tropes, or they're always going up the staircase because the elevator's broken, and
that's what she said in The Office. Like, it's lying.
Those kind of things. Yeah, that kind of stuff that they had in Big Bang Theory and some of those kind of shows. Great, that's where you find most of that today. But to do it in a movie comedy is really inspired that they remember that, and it works so effective.
Yeah, and it's great that we have a leader who really has empathy in the movie, because there's that whole scene where he's talking to his staff. They're about to bomb Libya, and the military leaders are telling him, well, we're not going to hit anyone, don't worry. And then he goes off on this monologue about, well, there's some janitor there just doing his job. And now he's going to be dead because of me. I did the least presidential thing I could possibly do.
Yeah, that you'll see me do.
Yeah, look what our president did on social media with his little victory lap with Iran. I mean, come on.
And it's not even true, but he's just, it's just this disrespect for the basic humanity of people and dare I say, the existence of people. But we have that as all. It's all about power. It's all about showing that you're the toughest guy and all that. It's like it's almost like like this Little Rascals version of manhood. Like, you're not a member of the No Women He-Man Man Boys Club,
Woman Haters
that kind
Club,
of
yeah.
Woman Haters Club, that
Or Al Bundy,
kind of
no man.
bullshit, and the real, yeah, exactly. I mean, the real strength of a man is in how smart and sensitive he can be, and receptive of. I mean, that's what do we judge a father for being the tough guy who just brings home the bacon? No, he's got to be more than that. He's got to be guiding his family and being a moral center, and there for the kids when they're upset too, and everything else. And we've gone to this weird sense of manhood. But that's what I love about Michael Douglas here is, he oftentimes played kind of macho guys. His character in Basic Instinct is kind of a tough macho cop, and he's played those kind of things for a lot of cops. I mean, he's even sexist towards his girlfriend in coma. But here he's like super sensitive, and he never really loses that. He loses a little bit with the political thing where he promised Sydney something that he decided to not put into the bill. But as a person with his daughter, even with AJ, as he's his friend, and he says, well, why don't you call me Andy? And he goes, well, I would, Mr. President. But he's looking for the humanity and doing it very well in almost every instance.
Yeah, and I really like the fact that we have a leader who is calm and concentrated in this movie. Actually, listen. Well, like and the thing is, he's not flawless in the movie. He doesn't. He doesn't automatically say, he doesn't automatically.
He takes a little long to get to the defense of everything. Yeah, but he finally does get there.
It's all the culmination to the ending. It's all about how President Shepard realizes, no, you know what? What's her name? Lydia or Linda or Sydney?
Sydney Ellen Wade.
Sydney Ellen Wade. Yeah. He's like, she's right. Don't come after her character. Come after me, because we need to take care of the environmental bill. Instead of having it at a 10% emissions cut, we're going to have it at a 20% a fossil fuel cut. And of course, when are we ever going to see that? Like, we're 2050, we might be underwater.
Spiked it up,
because
and especially when they eliminate the EV tax credit, which I don't know what that does to the EV business, which every car manufacturer on the planet is going towards doing, muscle cars and things like that. And then suddenly it's like, no, we want to, pipelines and oil and, drill, baby, drill. It's just, we've gone back to, it's like we're the character Daniel Plainfield from There Will Be Blood. Those are the kind of people that we think are like the prototypes that we need as leaders in this country. It's like, no.
We don't need people who are constantly at competition with each other. We need people who actually are compassionate to each other. And compassion is a thing that, a lot of Americans like to say, oh yeah, we believe in that. But it's like, do you really? Because look at what you do to immigrants. You treat them like garbage. And if it weren't for immigrants, we wouldn't have this country. But I guess our grandparents don't matter because they came here legally. It's like, yeah, but guess what? We have plenty of room.
We didn't come here legally originally. We escaped.
Took it all
England and decided to start our own country. So talk about the ultimate in illegality.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, since you brought it up, I mean, the one thing that I think is so amusing that they don't do here, they oftentimes will talk about a number of other sides of the positions and the counter sides and what might be the argument against them, which they're pretty fair about here. But so oftentimes we don't even talk about a lot of the real issues. The biggest problem that we have with immigration is the fact that companies for decades were willing to hire them without W-2s. And why do they come here? They only come here because they know they can get hired and they don't have to be citizens. And who's that? I mean, if you're not a citizen in this country, if I'm not mistaken, it's illegal, but it's, I think, considered a misdemeanor, even though we're, shipping people out of here. But if you hire somebody illegally without proper paperwork, it's a federal crime.
And now look at where we are.
Because you're cheating. You're cheating the tax system by not having to pay taxes on. Do you remember when Bill Clinton was picking his cabinet and he went through not one but two different attorney general candidates because they wanted the number one law enforcer in the land to be able to say they have a good record, and yet both of them hired illegal nannies because they wanted to save money and not do the paperwork on it because that's right, they've broken the law. You can't have the head
Mhm.
cop, at least not
Yeah.
then, be basically a lawbreaker. And nobody talks about that anymore when we're talking about illegal aliens. It's
Yeah.
like they're willing to buy that. They still have to pay taxes. They still have to this. But even though they're hired without proper citizenship or W-2s, and well, now they've got the W-2s. But I mean, for decades, I mean, back when immigration started coming here, at least the kind that Donald Trump just so hateful of, that was the problem. That the hotels and the restaurants and the farm communities and
And
the
he
people like
reneged on
that
that.
didn't
Yeah.
want to pay the money to actually pay these people with the situation that would require them to be federal employees. I mean,
Yeah.
statewise
Mhm.
with W-2s and everything else.
I will
Right,
say
right,
if
right,
there's
proper.
one little flaw I had with the movie is I wish I knew
Go
a
for it.
little more about Andrew Shepard's character, because I want to know
How so?
what was his life like after his wife passed? How did he deal with it?
Ah,
How did it affect him as a
right.
person? How does it
Yeah.
bring him to where he
Fair
is
question.
now? They don't really get into that. And I think,
Yeah.
like, usually I don't want
He-
movies to be longer, but I think just like
Sure.
maybe 10 minutes more,
Mhm.
they could have gotten into that.
Mhm.
We could have gotten into Sydney Allen Wade's character a bit more. Like, how did she end up joining the GDP? How did she end up becoming an activist? And what really kind of like drew her to her position? I mean, but those are like small
Sure.
complaints outside of a movie that I think is
Yeah.
otherwise just a really good rom-com. And
Something.
rom-coms are hard to do.
Yeah. Oh, something tells me there's probably scenes with his daughter on the cutting room floor, because
Yeah.
where does it fit? Where do you actually pause to have that
Mhm.
conversation? Or if you are playing the man who is completely encompassed by his work, and let's be honest, it's a
Mhm.
pretty busy job. That's likely the answer to that conversation of that's the guy who immersed himself at work for the good of the job while he lost his wife, and
Yeah.
like I think an extraneous version of this would be, dad driving daughter to school one day just to show that the president in a motorcade can drop his daughter off at elementary school. Like, if you need that scene, just be like, hey, I'm dad, don't forget I'm a dad, I
Yeah.
guess. But
They do shorthand it a
yeah.
little bit, but it is there, Mike. I think it's just maybe not as extensive. Like, yeah, I kept thinking like they might show, because arguably even then the president would have gotten a lot of sympathy if his wife died,
Mhm.
while he
Mhm.
was running for president or became president. There'd be a certain amount of
Mhm.
sympathy in those days for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We might see it. I mean, you get a little bit of it where he's talking to her while she's practicing the trombone and talking to her a little bit
Yeah.
about civics and
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff. The one thing I will say, and this is a testament to, I think, Michael Douglas is acting prowess too. I love that during the big final speech when he talks and he says, "I've been in love with 2 women. I lost the first to cancer."
Mhm.
And he gives it
Mhm.
just enough parentheses around it or space around
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
And I lost the
Yeah.
other one because I was too busy doing my job, but or that kind of thing. And it was like
Mm.
just in that moment, it's like you
Mm.
can just imagine him having to struggle with her individual needs as well as what he was trying to do as the president. And it still is a thing to him. He couldn't gloss over that. It took
Mhm.
some weight to even say that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And everyone's character, like everyone kind of has a shining moment in the movie.
Oh,
You have
completely.
Richard
Yeah.
Dreyfuss's moment. I love Michael J. Fox's moment, like that I said earlier, where
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
where he's basically yelling at the president. And he says, "Well, no, that's my right to do that." And then Annette Bening's scene with the president, where basically she's saying, "You know what? I dated you, but you're standing up against everything that I believe in, so I'm leaving." Like that's actually telling to her character, because her character
Mhm.
sort of goes through like this Cinderella story. She's
Yeah.
being put in the White House. She's being wined and dined by like all these, various leaders. And there's even a great bit where the president of France makes a joke like, "Oh, well, you're a bit like Marie Antoinette right now, and you'd be facing the guillotine for, having a luxurious life while the people at the bottom, 90 some percent are struggling." And there's great little moments like that, and I think that's the great. Sorkin
Yeah.
knows how to balance a lot of characters
Oh,
without making the
totally.
movie feel like it's too much, and it really does kind of capture what it's like
Yeah.
to be in the White House. You walk, it's very similar to the West Wing and everything else you see, where the president is walking around and people are saying, "Okay, you have this meeting at this time, and then you have this at that time," and he goes, "Okay."
Mhm.
Okay, like
They're
it gives
walking
you
and
a
talking.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gives you a sense of what it's like to be president. And also it really gives a good sense of how there are multiple personalities within the White House who are different but have to work together in order to make a difference in this country.
Right.
Yeah. But a beautiful
interesting
film. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Something interesting in the casting section of things is like Benning is 14 years younger than Michael Douglas, and like it, it still plays. Like it helps that,
she's always seemed very mature as an actress. I think
she's older, and she plays older, and then obviously Douglas being, pretty square jawed, he looks younger than he is. But I saw in like the trivia things where Emma Thompson, Jessica Lange, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Susan Sarandon were all considered for the role of Sydney. And I'm trying to kind of in my brain think like, what would that movie look like with any of them? And I don't know from that list. I mean, obviously Pfeiffer's the sizzler of the bunch, and maybe at that time Sarandon would have been too. But I think they landed with a good one because like who could articulate the political principles? And Benning just has that way about her where, almost like a Sally Field, where she can look smart, adult, and like not that Jessica Lange and Michelle Pfeiffer are tart by any means, but they're better at that stuff than they are at this stuff. And Benning did a nice job. I got to really tip my hat.
Yeah, and a testament to Sydney Ellen Wayne's character is that despite that she's kind of like enamored with power, she doesn't let it get to her. She ends up sticking with her principles. And that's kind of why it's great that they got together in the end. It's two opposite sides coming together. And the movie's a lot of fun, great dialogue. The set of the White House was used on multiple other films.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm losing my track of thought here, but the main thing that really makes this movie work is that it's fast paced and it's charming the whole way. Like that score that you have in the movie from Mark Shaman, it's like this. It's like a score we don't get anymore. We don't get the big sweeping orchestra. We mostly just get
not in a comedy. Not in a comedy.
Not in a comedy.
Yeah. You get a noodly.
Well, it's part of that enchantment that you talked about, Don.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
even the politics is enchanting here because it's energetic and it's fun and there's banter, so it's enjoyable to watch.
It's hard, like you said, it's hard to get a score in a rom-com that still has the sweep of the presidency, because if this was a rom-com, it'd be Randy Newman on a fucking piano. Like it would just be
maybe a little guitar in the background, as they always. Maybe. It's always piano and guitar. Maybe an odd clarinet to establish it as a funny instrument that we're in a comedy.
Or there's always that there's always that repeated beat where it's like do 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 do.
Like 10 years ago, this is Arthur. Like it's just really cheesy. It's Marvin Hamlish up here.
By the way, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go. You got it.
No, the other thing too, I just want to say too that is kind of interesting is, Martin Sheen isn't usually funny, and he's pretty funny in this one. He's got some very funny lines, and he's all knowing, AJ, and smart and stuff. But he wasn't known for being funny, but he's quite wry in this. On the other side of it, Michael J. Fox was primarily known as being a comedic actor, and yet I would argue that he's got maybe the most serious of most of the characters around the president, in the sense that he's kind of the most righteous one, and he has that great dialogue too. In fact, I just looked it up because I wanted to quote it properly. But I also think the other great quote from this is when he's trying to convince the president to fight. He says, talking about what people are looking for, and he says, they're so thirsty for leadership, they'll crawl through the desert towards a mirage. And when they discover there's no water, they'll drink the sand. And then, Andy Shepard pushes back and goes, so what is that saying? And he says, they don't drink the sand because they're thirsty. They drink the sand because they don't know the difference. And I think that's kind of going back to what you were talking about, Mike, and you mentioned too early on in the show, Don, is that, we've got people who don't realize that they're voting against their own interests, or they think this is leadership, even though it's just antagonism or bullying, or they so want to just hang out in their tribes and not think or ask the right questions. Just know that the kind of misery loves company almost, or fear. They're just, please relieve my fear. I don't care how you do it. It doesn't have to make sense. I'll drink the sand. Just relieve my fear. But I love that, because I think that's so true, because we have a debate today about what are facts and what's the truth. And that line is about they will buy anything if it comes wrapped in the illusion of being the answer to water. And
Yeah.
and
It's
are we
really yeah. It's really like I think ever since the televised debate with Nixon versus JFK, the politics has become more about like a beauty contest than it has been
Yeah,
about something
would agree.
regarding substance. And I mean, not
Yeah.
beauty contest in terms of just appearance. Although, I mean, during that debate, it was certainly the appearance because like Nixon was sweating and JFK looked all nice and calm. But then people who heard it on the
We've
radio
done Paul
thought,
Ryan drinking water. We've done J.D. Vance.
oh my gosh,
His
yeah.
body. We'll play the body language debate game all day long. I mean, Trump walking around the sniff. Who was the sniff?
Are you talking about Joe Biden when
it
he
was
was like
like just
sniffing girls?
all that stuff still registers. It's louder now because we have it's on replay with the internet and YouTube. Yeah, it's just so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I was talking to someone while I was on a political campaign. They're like, "Oh, I get my news from TikTok," and I just wanted to smack his phone out of his hand. I was like,
Yeah.
"Are you kidding me?"
But see, that's another thing, Mike, you've just hit on that I think is interesting and really great about this movie is that whether it's because Andy Shepard is an ex-history teacher, or that's kind of the interest of Sorkin on the side, and certainly brought into the West Wing, is a lot of it is about sort of what is the action and then what is the reaction, just like there is in science. But okay, this is what this candidate or this position stands for. Now, what is the opposite that I'm going to take to be opposed to that so I can beat him and win? Whether you're that far off or not, I would be willing to bet that if you talk to 100 people, no matter what kind of voter they were, they would want something done about guns, just like they are talking about in this movie. But because the Republicans and the NRA and all that, they've got to counter the what they perceive as the soft commie left, and they've been having that fight since the post World War II. They go harder towards the farther end of the spectrum to counter that. Same here with Bob Rumson. He's talking about character issue. Well, this man has incredible character to be able to be the president while his wife was dying, and then start off the movie with 63% approval rating, and he's doing well by all measures of them. And when he's dating a woman, it's just because is he the president having sex, or maybe he's dating too liberal of a lobbyist or whatever. But it's funny they take the opposite end of it, and I think that has become such an issue today here that we have to see the opponents, no matter who they are, run to the other end of the spectrum to be able to draw the contrast. And I think most people are in the middle somewhere, and there's probably more common ground, but that doesn't necessarily win elections. And in the greater contrast, the greater it is for people to think they know what the story is, or to follow the players and not have to think too much. Again, the news, I think, is helping everybody sort of, here's the good guys, here's the bad guys. Now let's put them in the box and watch them fight.
Yeah. And that's the unfortunate thing about politics these days. The more media we consume, the less informed we are, which is odd because you would think the opposite would happen, but it didn't. But I mean, even for 1995, the fact that they're talking about gun control and global warming and we still haven't gotten anything done is really telling. But
we don't talk about it. I mean, they gave us, during the beginning of the Trump administration, they said we had 12 years left to really start correcting dramatically all the things that need to be done to curb global warming. 12 years. Well, we're at year 9 now, and nobody's talking about it. In fact, they're cutting it out of the bill today. So, I mean, in another 10 years, we're going to, oh, that's right. Well, I guess we were a little too worried about billionaires having to pay even less tax. That's the other thing, because that tax stuff is crazy. Nobody pays their tax rate. They all lower it through deduction. So, I mean, do you remember when Mitt Romney came out with his tax return when he was running against Obama? He paid 14% that year. He's a millionaire, or I think he was a millionaire, at least a high-end millionaire. I don't think he was a billionaire. And he paid 14% in taxes. So a secretary who's doing the easy form is probably paying 21%, but he paid 14% as a millionaire. So you tell me whose taxes are too high? Nobody pays. I mean, most companies don't pay taxes. They always write it off, find ways to lower their tax rate at the very least, if not, get refunds back altogether because of, well, we had this for R&D and we had this for that and X, Y, and Z. It's insane that has become the entire enchilada for the GOP and this big beautiful bill, as Trump calls it, when it's like the billionaires, they've got more money. They don't know how to spend it, but they need that tax cut because their 14% is still too high.
Yeah, it's always the upper 1% who want the tax cuts. Although they can
and they've got all the money
it.
in the world. What do they need it for?
Nothing, to go to space, I guess.
Well, the difference between
won't do that anytime soon either.
$20,000 versus somebody who has $40,000 as salary is monumental. The difference between somebody who's got $50 million and $100 million, not that much difference. I mean, you can buy more shit, and maybe you have more power on certain levels if you want to, be able to say, hey, I've got these companies and we're doing all these kinds of businesses and I've got my fingers dabbling in everything. But you're not living any better with 50 million versus 20 million, really. I mean, how many homes do you need that you never visit? Remember when McCain was asked that? How many homes he had? He had to think about it because he couldn't tell. Because, he's probably bought a bunch of investments because he's got too much money, but he doesn't go to 7 houses. He probably goes to 3. You don't need much.
Yeah, it's amazing. We have so many presidents who were like Nepo babies, and some of them were okay. I mean, FDR was a Nepo baby. He was okay. JFK was a Nepo baby. He was okay. But then we get Bush. Bush Jr., and we get and then we get Trump, and then the world ends. And it's like, why would you trust a guy who was born into millions of dollars to give a damn about you? But that's where we are. And I'm just gonna wrap things up on this movie.
Here, I'll bring it to the movie. I have kind of a closing question to the day it's assembled here. Could this two-parter? Could this movie be done today?
Yeah, I think so. You just include social media, but it's still as relevant. I think you can pull it off. Yeah.
Would it be?
I think they try to balance it more. I think the liberal filmmakers would probably feel, well, in order to get the people in the audience in the red states to see, we better downplay some of that, we'll have at least one good Republican character in here, or something like that. Right. I think you could make it, but it would be watered down a little bit.
Yeah. I think it would be a lot more crass because everyone in the White House now is led by a Bulgarian.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Veep, we've seen Ian Nucci's political comedies come across the way where we're just going crazy with it. Like, I don't know who, because I can't answer that question that I'm asking you. That's why I'm asking.
What you're asking, Don, is something that sincere could be done. I don't know. It seems like politics is almost fodder for Wag the Dog, Veep, and In the Loop, those kind of films.
Adam McKay stuff, like
that's right.
Streep's a bumbling president, like we're gonna be like I don't know who makes this movie today. It's going to be the Republican version of this. Like Angel fucking Studios is going to make this movie. The story with a Republican in it instead of a Democrat. Like that's who's going to make this movie before we make another version of this.
But see, even those guys can't make it. They go back to like a Reagan bio, something that was easy to talk about 50 years ago or whatever it was.
Yeah. Saint Reagan is the Republicans, as I like to have them think of them.
Your second question, Don?
Yeah. The second part, like, who would you want to be Andrew Shepard today, actor or actress? Like who is that? Who's in that Douglas spot? Who could turn our heads with a role like this at top dog? Because we've had our share of movie presidents, we've had our Morgan Freemans, and we've had our different people, and Jeff Bridges and The Contender, and we've had some people, but we're 30 years after the wheelhouse of a guy in his 50s. Like, which actor today could do this and isn't ancient? Because Kevin Costner could do a part like this, but he's 73 years old.
Maybe. Well, this is kind of a silly one, but maybe Chris Evans, Captain America, could maybe do it. Or
he's my age. He's 43, 44. That'd be fun.
In the 50s or later, that's a tricky one. I mean, I think I think in some respects, like a Brad Pitt, even when he's kind of playing scoundrels, is kind of affable and grounded and has a certain gravitas to him. Certainly on display in F1, even though he's supposed to be kind of the edgy character, the maverick, he's got a certain amount of weight to his experience that I think comes through it. But that's a good question, a really good question, Don, because there aren't a lot of those, and certainly if there aren't a lot of actors who immediately come to mind, like maybe back in
right, like because
like Harrison Ford was an easy choice. Robert Redford,
of
Paul
course.
Newman, a lot of those, even though they had
Yeah.
certainly varied careers and played scoundrels and other characters, but
like the generation that's 50 is
tricky.
like
Yeah.
Matt Damon, Ben Affleck,
Yeah,
Will Smith,
yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
see any of those guys, even though
They still seem a little
Affleck and Damon have
boyish.
shown. Yeah, they do. So like even though
Yeah.
Affleck and Damon have shown their politics on their sleeve as stars, so is
Yeah.
George Clooney a generation before him. Like it'd still be weird to see Matt Damon rom-com with the president, Will Smith
Yeah,
rom-com as the
yeah.
president. Leonardo DiCaprio, no chance. He's too edgy,
No.
Well, what you're
but
also
it'd be fun to see.
asking. Oh, I'm sorry, Don. What you're also
go ahead.
asking though is, I think we don't see a lot of people playing romance anymore on screen.
That's
It just
the thing,
doesn't
too.
happen.
Yeah.
This was a romantic comedy back in the day when there were a lot of them. In fact, one of the movies that we were going to potentially talk about, another movie that sort of blended rom-com with politics was Dave, and
great
that
movie.
was
Yeah.
Sigourney Weaver and Kevin Kline, and they were terrific in it. And that was also very political, but it was a love story as well, which was very unusual because she was falling in love with the man pretending to be her husband. But yeah, there's just not a lot of those kind of films today. Or if there is a love story, it's like it was in F1. It's sort of the B story, which is sort of wedged in there just so, we've got this good looking hero leading man here. We're not going to do anything with that.
I'm in the minority on F1.
Right.
Yeah, everyone loved F1 with me. But no, I really, I was thinking one, and he wouldn't. This is very Hollywood because I'm not going with an American to play the American president, but I think Hugh Jackman could do that role because he's tough, but at the same time he's very charming, and he can sing. But he won't be singing in this movie. Maybe he could make it a musical. But I think he could pull that role.
He would
off.
nail it.
He's got the
solid
range.
Winner there.
Yeah, him and
sure.
Kate Blanchett as.
I mean, in some respects, the one person you've got who could easily still do that, even though he's now in his 60s, is George Clooney. I mean, Clooney is sort of the handsome lead man. He's got a light touch to him. He knows how to do the comedy.
Take him out back and beat the shit out of him. He could drop a line like that.
Yeah, he would be very good at that. I mean, 10 years ago, you could have seen Clooney doing this kind of role.
Yeah.
Maybe even today, if he was. See, that's the other thing. Wouldn't it be interesting to do it today where somebody is older? Can you still find love?
Or are we going to have the Joe Biden
60s
biopic starring?
That's good. Who would play Joe Biden?
Oh God, I don't know.
I know perfect actor for Trump would have been
makeup
Philip
on
Seymour
somebody.
Hoffman,
Yeah.
All right. So if you guys were to, oh, I'm sorry. So if you guys were to give, we're going to go with our ratings for the movie, 1 out of 4 Guinnesses, and I include the halves. Don, what would your rating for the American president be?
I don't do halves. And this is, it was good then, and it is good now in terms of just, the throwback that it is, the witty time capsule, the balance between pep and patience, and this is the full 4 Guinnesses for me. Rom-coms with principles and with a different setting don't get much better than this. Because I versus the dark satires that mire most movies about presidents now, or the disaster flicks where it's Air Force One and Deep Impact and stuff like that. Like, this is such a departure and a pleasant one where I'm down for it. 4.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, what's your rating?
Absolutely 4. In fact, I will confess to you all, one of the reasons I thought of this movie off the top of my head is when this movie is on, it was on TBS for a while. I mean, I think it really kind of found, its built audience over the course of probably video rentals, as well as being on TBS and or TNT, one of those cable channels all the time. I stop and watch it because even if I'm just like, I'll just watch 10 minutes of this, it's so eminently watchable. It's like you can come in at any moment on it. It's like, damn, that's well written. It's so well acted. It's funny. It's moving. It's kind of important to. I love this movie. Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. So and I'm sorry, I'm going to use the half here because I always think the half is like that little extra bit of sauce that kind of says, you know what? This is better than just good. This is very good, but it hasn't reached greatness. Yeah. So for me, it's 3.5 because did I put? Yeah, I did. Okay. Because I wanted, like I said earlier, I'd like to see a little more of the relationship between Shepard and his previous wife. How he, like just a little flashback of her cancer, something something like that. Just a little dab more of character, but
maybe 3 full plates
yeah.
of that Virginia ham with just a couple more bites of meat that makes it almost a 4.
Let's let's bring back Celia Ward from The Fugitive, and that way we can kill her off in 2 movies in a row. You know, like let's never die for Harrison Ford, let's never die for Michael Douglas.
I'm just kind of like the president going on a revenge.
Don't let her marry those 90s leading men.
No, Celia. But it's television.
It could have been Bonnie Bedelia.
No. Yeah, but it's a movie we don't really get anymore.
Put Kathleen Turner.
Yeah. Sorry, I was cutting everyone
stunt
off.
casting there, you know.
Yeah, but we don't really get a movie like this anymore. We don't get a movie that's political and charming and sweet to its audience. It's not standing on a podium, although there is a podium speech in the movie, but it's not standing on the podium saying, I'm right, you're wrong. Like, no, this is really about
talking to instead of at. It's big difference, yeah.
It's all about love and about how we spread that throughout the country. Yeehaw. Anyways, guys, before I leave, what do you guys want to plug before we take off?
Oh, gosh. You first, Jeff.
Oh, well, as always, my movie reviews and film reviews as well can be found at theestablishingshot.org. I do 1-minute movie reviews now on TikTok under the name Jeff York Chicago. I am on the same name on Instagram, and proud member of the Chicago Indie Critics, along with Don from the very get-go. Don, I think I was your first call, or first said, "Hey, both writing for the Examiner. You want to join our critics group?" I said, "Sure, why not?" And I've known you for how many years now? Is that 15 years?
Wow, yeah, at least. Yeah,
at least. Wow, amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I do caricatures with movies and shows I like or particularly stick with me. So, you can look up Jeff York Caricatures on Instagram as well, or jeffyorkcaricatures.com. It's a website I have. So do a little bit of writing, a little bit of reviewing, a little bit of drawing. So all fun, all part of the media.
That's right.
All right.
For me, Don Shanahan, Every Movie Has a Lesson is the personal website. I'm the editor-in-chief of Film Obsessive. I'm the co-host of the Cinephile History of the podcast. I'm in a zillion critics groups, including the Chicago Indie Critics that we're all in here for today. The social media stuff can be the same search quality as a Film Obsessive, or Every Movie Has a Lesson. So, teacher on summer break, I'm just happy to be here. It's Tuesday night. Woo!
Nice. By the way, Mike, because of the generosity of you and Don and Ian Simmons and a couple others, I'm quickly getting up there with the Don Shanahan level of guest appearances. I think you said one time that you've been guest on 100 shows or something like that.
I'm on 100. I've had 130 something appearances on just Ian's, let alone.
Oh wow!
I'm about 6.
I'm not going to touch that for a while, but I've been doing his show almost every weekend, doing Mike's and some others quite consistently. So I'm people say like, "Do you get paid for that?" It's like I get paid because I get the attention. The attention is hopefully their audiences find your stuff. I get the
holy,
that's right.
It's not from Alistair Crowley.
A little bit of that. Right. Alistair, have you had to fight that all your life? It's like the devil's in the details. But no, I get a little bit of the rubbing off on good fortune of being with you guys. So some other audience members find their way to me.
Yeah. Well, guys, if you want to check out my stuff, it's at ypareviews.com. The YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree. And you can find this stream on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and a bunch of other services at YPA Reviews. I'm also on TikTok, where I do like little reactions to movies and stuff like that, and clips from this show here and there. And that's YPA Reviews Chicago, because somehow someone else had another YPA reviews. I don't know that. But those bastards. I'm gonna sue them. But if you want it, but the YPA censor, You'll Probably Agree. Check out Don's written review for The American President. It's the top one on Rotten Tomatoes. So
it's only because it's the most recent one written. That's it. That's the only reason why it's on top.
Hey, did you manipulate this to get it? He got the vote. He manipulated the vote.
He manipulated the metadata.
No, it is literally the newest in chronological order review submitted for the movie. But strong movie. I wrote it for the 25th anniversary 5 years ago. So I'm proud of the review.
And nobody's written about it since.
Not since 2020.
There's not a lot of attention on it, but
I moved I moved the needle 2% because there's only 55 reviews on there, so I'm 1.something%
very
of the
nice.
reviews. So yeah,
Wow, that's
it
great.
bumped from 89 to 91 because of me. So yeah.
Don, what was the movie that you moved from 100 down to 99? What was that movie?
Toy Story 4. I was part of a contingent of there are about
Well,
45
I
of
agree
us.
with you on it.
They gave you as
down
much
on
grief
it.
about that as my original review of Everything Everywhere
Yeah.
All at Once.
There were,
I quibbled with it,
yeah.
and one guy wrote me, he's like,
Yeah.
how do you feel to be the only person on Rotten
Oh.
Tomatoes who didn't like that movie? I found 15 others, but who's counting? But
there were
I
four
was
or five
skewered by a
reviewers
couple people about that review, just like you got
Yeah.
blowback over Toy
Oh.
Story 4.
I got
I got
many,
a lot
the
of
most
shit for not
comments I've ever
liking
gotten
F1.
on review. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
Everyone-
worth it. Yeah, we're having. I wield that power lightly and like just. I know that it matters. Like it's fun to take some of these little obscure movies and put a review on there and bump it a few points. Like
Yeah, for sure.
with the podcast, Will and I have been doing that. Like Hanover Street with Harrison Ford, we both liked it, and that one positive review was one of like 18 reviews for the movie. So like we were like 4% jump because of us.
Oh, that's nice.
Like we're having some fun, like snarking some. We've been calling it targeting tomatoes. We're having a little fun.
Very nice. Very nice.
That should be the rival site to Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh,
Just
wow.
targeting tomatoes.
What was the banana one that was so
Oh,
Great.
Banana Meter. Yeah. I remember
Sour
one critic tried to
grapes.
get me on it, and he's like, go on Banana
Yeah.
Meter. I'm like, no, look at their site. It looks like
It seemed
crap.
like something
Yeah.
that should be on AVN rather than.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, guys, if you liked what you saw, if you liked what you listened, please subscribe. It's at YPA Reviews. I'm done saying YPA Reviews. I'm fucking sick of saying it. All right, but guys, thanks so much for tuning in. And yeah, hopefully I'll be at the White House someday, but not right now. All right, here comes the outro video, and I'll say my goodbyes afterwards. All right.